guys, so today we are going to talk about our poop. Yes, our poop, our stools, our fecal matter, whatever it is you want to call it. And a lot of you are going to be like, oh my god, Cassandra, that's such a disgusting video. And yes, it is, but you know what else? It's important. This all stemmed from a video that I did about, I think it was my medical mystery or before my medical mystery. I don't even remember which video, but there was one video I was talking about my things were like looking really weird, and I am not one to like turn around and inspect what happens, but ever since that happened I was like, maybe this is something I should check on. So I went to the doctor, all that kind of stuff, and since then I've been slowly researching, looking at books at the library, researching online, asking a doctor every now and then, and I've pretty confident with what I've found, and I wanted to talk to you guys about your poop. First off, let's talk about why it's so important. Our poop is a reflection of what's going on in our body. By looking at our poo, we can tell, that's like my favorite word, by looking at our poo, again, poo, by looking at our poo, we can tell if we have a couple of infections brewing. We can see if our diet is healthy or not. We can see if there's an underlying medical condition we don't know about, or if something's not working, etc. And it's pretty important to understand the color and the texture. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I have kind of a chart, kind of a list of things that you should or shouldn't look for and what they mean. And we're now going to take a little discussion talk about what's going on inside of our bodies. So first off, let's talk about the color. What is a normal color of poo? A normal color is usually a light, kind of muddy brown. The usual texture kind of depends. The most regular texture is just a normal log. Nothing too bumpy, but definitely not like falling apart or diarrhea-y. Oh my god, this is an awful video. I'm so sorry. That is generally what a good, healthy poo looks like. And every now and then, y'all know, sometimes what ends up doesn't look anything like that. If you have a stool that is very light brown as compared to what you usually do, that could mean that there's a little bit too much of fatty deposits in your body. What happens is that we eat fat, right, in our foods, good, delicious, yummy. If that's not metabolized properly, or if we're eating too much of it, it will reflect in our poop. Guess what else? If you eat too much fat in your diet, your poop will float. That means that there's a lot of fat in the diet, because fat floats, muscle sinks. Same with other matter. Other matter usually sinks. But if you have a poo that's floating, floating poo, probably means you have a little bit too much fat in your diet, especially if it's floating and it's a light brown color. So what could cause that? Eating too much fat. If you don't have enough fiber in your system, if you don't eat enough fiber, that could cause that, because fiber and calcium and vitamin D will bond with that fat and make it digestible. If we don't have vitamin D with our fat, if we don't have a little bit of calcium with our fat, oh no, I think you don't need calcium. Calcium is either something you need to eat with fat or something you should totally avoid with fat, and I forget which one it is, but one of those, and you need to have vitamin D along with fat in your diet in order for your body to readily absorb it. Or you need to have fat with vitamin D. No, you do need to have fat with calcium. Anyways, you need to have fat with calcium in order to absorb it. And without it, you could be having a couple of medical problems. So, what happens if your poo is bright red? Never had this happen, but for some people it does. That could mean some very serious medical conditions. If you have a bright red poo, you should probably see a doctor immediately. Bright red poo can be a result of hemorrhoids. Hemorrhoids is basically bleeding on the inside of the butt, like big rashy bumps. And I know it because a extended family member of my family actually had it, and we talked about it at the dinner table. It was quite interesting when they were over. Anyways, hemorrhoids can be very serious, and if you haven't had that checked out before, you should. It could also mean colon cancer. Colon is what our poo comes out of. It comes out of the rectum. And if there's a cancerous matter in there, for some reason that can turn the poo red. Also, if you have a digestive system disorder, if it looks like really bloody, it means that you might have lower intestinal bleeding. Now, we'll talk in a second about if you have bleeding up here by the stomach, but if you're bleeding in your intestines, in your rectum, if you're bleeding because the body, it kind of is like a tunnel. We eat it, then it goes down into our stomach, then it goes down to the small intestine, then the large intestine, then it comes out. Now, if it's up here, it's going to be a different color, but if you're bleeding at the kind of end of this trail, then that could cause bright red poos, and it could be a digestive problem, it could be there's a rupture in there or something like that. Also, if you eat foods that are, red food dye, that might turn your poo red too. I know that if you eat a lot of beets are a vegetable. If you eat a lot of beets, I know that your pee will turn red, but I don't know if beets will do anything to your poo or not. So if you're a big fan of borscht or other very foods that have a lot of beets in it, tell me if your poo turns red or not. So if you have red poo and it's not from eating beets or really sugary red candies, and you don't have hemorrhoids, then you should probably go get that checked out. Next, let's talk about poo that's either black or has black streaks. That's the bleeding up here, like I was talking about. Even if your poo is a normal color, but you have these big black streaks that looks like oil or tar, you need to go to the doctor immediately, or if your poo is just completely black. What that means is that you're probably bleeding somewhere in the beginning of this little system. You might be bleeding in your esophagus, you might be bleeding in your stomach, you might be bleeding at the very beginning of your intestines. You could have a stomach ulcer, which is a big hole in your stomach. You could have those hemorrhoids that we talked about at the end. You could have those further up your system. If you see black tarry streaks, you need to see a doctor. Reason why is because that black tarry stuff is dried blood. If we get a scab, you know how sometimes it turns kind of brown? Well, the body's moist, so it becomes this brown, streaky stuff. So if you have a poo with all these streaks in it, you need to see a doctor. If you do eat a ton of dark foods like black licorice, or if you eat a ton of blueberries, or a ton of black olives, like if you live on a diet of blueberries, black licorice, and black olives, your poo might be black. So kind of know what you're eating, but if you're in a normal diet, your poo should never be black, or even have those streaks in it. If you do drink too much alcohol, you can also get black poo. It won't be streaky if you drink too much alcohol, but if you drink too much alcohol, your poo might have a little bit of black specks in it, or it might be completely black depending on how much alcohol you're drinking, which means that your liver and your kidneys aren't really processing it correctly. Also, if you don't have enough blood flow to your digestive tract or your intestines, your stomach and your intestines are mainly what digest your food. If for some reason your heart isn't pumping enough blood to those places, or your veins aren't working, that can also cause black poo because it won't be digested properly. If we eat all these olives and we don't digest them, obviously they're going to come out black. Bottom line, if you know that you haven't eaten 2 pounds of licorice, 3 cans of olives, and 5 tubs of blueberries, and your poo is black, or if it's black and streaky, you should go see a doctor. And even if your poo is black because of alcohol consumption, you should still see a doctor and probably a psychologist if you're drinking that much. So now, what happens if your poo is bright orange? This has happened to me before. You're going to take a poo and it comes out a little bit darker than this orange color. And you're like, oh my God, I did not eat 10,000 tons of carrots yesterday. That can also be a pretty big issue. Orange poos can mean that your gallbladder is malfunctioning. The gallbladder is a little organ kind of off to the side of our stomach that secretes different acids and things like that. And when it malfunctions, sometimes like when there's not enough of that being pushed into our stomach, sometimes it'll change the color of the poo. In addition, a fast metabolism, like if you eat something and you notice you're pooping it out the next day, you can tell like certain foods like green leafy vegetables or popcorn. If you eat popcorn, you can tell when it comes out because there are a bunch of little like things in the toilet, like you can tell. Or like corn, you might notice it's like corny, like there's corns in there. Let me tell you, if you have a very, very fast digestive system and it's like it goes in your mouth and it comes at your butt like 3 hours later, sometimes that can be the cause of an orange poo as well. Also, if you eat medicines, certain medicines can cause orange poo. Certain medications can. I know that when I was on an acne supplement, my poo turned bright orange for a little while I was using it, but I got off it immediately because it was like making my tummy all disgusting. But of course, if you eat foods that are orange, and not just orange, but beta-carotene. Beta-carotene is usually what's in orange foods. For instance, carrots. Carrots have a ton of beta-carotene, which is great for your eyesight. But if you eat a ton of beta-carotene, your poo could be orange. If you eat like pumpkin or sweet potatoes, or I don't think oranges will do it. Maybe, I don't know, because I've never eaten like a million oranges. Maybe if you eat too many oranges, things like that. But oranges is a citrus, not necessarily a vegetable. Just be careful and make sure you know what you're eating so you know what's going to come out. Another big thing is that if you eat things high in aluminum, if you have, for some reason, aluminum can get in food. Sometimes aluminum is naturally found in foods. Certain nuts might have it. Or heavy metals, that can also cause orange poos. And I don't know what my orange poo was. I didn't go see a doctor because it wasn't like I pooed and then it was like orange for a week. I've only had one orange poo in my entire life. But if it looks like it's persistent, like a gallbladder problem, go see a doctor immediately. But if you think it was something orange that you ate, or I personally think maybe it was something that I ate that was orange, I had a fast metabolism, that week I had eaten a lot of iron. I don't know if iron has anything to do with it because I haven't found any evidence saying that iron will give you an orange poo. But bottom line, if you don't have a fast metabolism, if you didn't eat anything orange, and if your poo is staying orange for a while, that is a serious medical condition, so you should probably go get it checked out. Yellow can be a hint of pancreatic cancer. The pancreas is in... No, prostate is for men. Everyone has a pancreas. Sorry about that. Everyone has a pancreas, and sometimes when that goes wrong, it can cause your poos to be yellow. There's also something called Gilbert's syndrome. I don't know much about that. There's also something called girldalysis or something like that. I don't know how it's spelled. I don't know what it means, but that's what it is. If you have a yellow poo, you should see a doctor and ask if you have any of those things, because I don't know much about yellow poos, and I didn't find a lot of information about yellow poos. So if you have yellow poo, I'm not the best one to ask. Gilbert's syndrome could mean that your blood isn't working right. We have white blood cells and red blood cells. Red blood cells are the ones that carry the oxygen, and the white ones are the ones that help us fight infection. Now, if we're not getting enough oxygen to our red blood cells, I think that's what Gilbert's syndrome means. So if you don't have enough oxygen in your body, and your body isn't processing oxygen right, I think that's what it is that causes those yellow poos. If you eat something that's high in like yellow food coloring, then maybe, but you would have to like chug bottles of yellow food coloring for that to happen. But if your poo is bright yellow, it's almost always going to be something a little bit more serious. Make sure you go check that out because that's a big one too. Here's one that I've experienced many times, and I think a lot of other people too. What if your poo is green? Ooh, yummy. Well, it kind of depends on what shade of green, but generally if it's dark green, could be that you're a healthy salad eater. Green usually means that maybe you didn't digest a salad properly, or there's a little bit of green left over. That's fine. Sometimes if you have a very fast metabolism, you will eat some green salad, it'll come out a couple days later and it'll still be green because the body hasn't sucked out all those nutrients. Sometimes irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, sometimes if you have that, it can kind of push things out before they're ready to come out, which could mean that you ate some green salad and it just left before it should have. Also celiac disease, which is gluten intolerance. If you are not okay with eating gluten and you eat some gluten along with some salads, or just some gluten in general can kind of cause a lighter green, that could be too. It's just this undigested matter. Or if you chug like if you eat an entire St. Patrick's Day frosted green cake, you know, something like that. Generally green is okay. Generally green is not life-threatening, and it's probably the scariest and one of the most common non-brown colors, but if it's green, then probably just means you're eating some good foods. If your poo is gray, that's something called metal absorption. Basically, your body is not digesting things right. The gallbladder produces that fluid, kind of that acid stuff, and when you have meta-absorption, it's stopping that from getting into the rest of your body, I guess. Basically, that stuff that comes out of the gallbladder is supposed to go into your intestines, and when it doesn't, it can cause gray poo. If you have a tumor up here in that gallbladder, or if you have tumors on the transit tube that gets that acid from the gallbladder to the other areas, or any tumors around there, it can also cause that gray stuff. And if I'm correct, I might not be, but if I'm correct, that means that that's not being absorbed and you're absorbing metals instead, which is very, very dangerous. So gray poos, go see a doctor. Next, let's talk very, very quickly about the texture of poop, because my iPad is dying and because my camera is dying. All right? Well, first off, what happens if your poos are watery? Diarrhea. Yay! Could mean that you took too many laxatives. Could be food poisoning. Even be anxiety. Some anxiety problems, or if you have like a really fast metabolism and you're eating a couple things that don't go together, your body's diarrhea is your body's way of getting rid of something. It wants it gone. And sometimes even salt can do that. So be kind of careful, but if you have diarrhea, hopefully it's just a bug or an infection, something like a little flu bug or food poisoning, and hopefully it'll pass. Now, if it's persistent, go see a doctor. Now, if you eat gluten and you're intolerant to it, you will be having diarrhea out the yin-yang, so it's persistent. Maybe it's that you have a gluten intolerance, or otherwise known as celiac disease. It could even be bowel disease or bowel cancer. So if it is persistent, you should talk to a doctor. Some medication can cause this as well, or even high-fiber diets. Usually, if you eat a diet that's high in fiber, your poo will come out a little bit more, not diarrhea exactly, but a little bit more, stringy, I guess. Like, it'll come out as a semi-solid lump or a very, very soft poo. If your poo is very, very soft and if it kind of pieces together, like away from itself in the toilet, probably means a high intake of fiber. But if it just comes out and you feel like you're pissing out of your butt, that probably means that you have diarrhea and some of these other conditions if it persists. Now, if you're farting and if you're really, really cramped up, and if you're having diarrhea at the same time, that could be a lactose problem. So if those are your symptoms, you might want to try cutting out dairy. Next, what if your poos are really, really hard and kind of like dry, like they don't look like moist poos, they're just like really, really hard? That could be that you're constipated. You need to get some fiber up into your system. Generally, these hard lumps are very hard to pass, and usually, like I poo like 3 to 4 times a day. Mine are always either soft or regular. Now, usually if you have a very hard poo, you're only pooing maybe once a day, maybe once every 2 days, once every 3 days. You need to go fix that. You need to go get some greens up in your system, okay? Because the longer your poo stays in your body, the more toxins your body is going to absorb. So it's good to have a regular poo cycle, not these hard lobby lumps that come out once a week. If your poo is stringy, if it's kind of like stringy and long and piecey together, that could be a parasitical infection. I think is how you say it, which means parasites. Parasites are more common than you think. They can be in meats. A lot of times they come in on fruits and vegetables from external countries who don't have like really clean standards. Even if they come from a country that has clean standards, there can always be like a little parasite that gets in. Parasites can cause this to be very, very stringy. Parasites are very dangerous. Should we have a video on parasites or not? They can be very dangerous because they actually suck the nutrition out of the food and live inside of you and like off of you, and you end up not being too healthy. Also, like sometimes people have worms. Worms are kind of like parasites, only they keep on growing. Those can be, if you see strings in your poo, it could actually be they're not strings, they're worms. Some people have known to poop out these worms that are inside of their bodies. So if your poo is stringy, bottom line, you should be talking to a doctor immediately just to make sure it's not those, because parasites and worms can just grow so quickly and be a huge, huge, huge problem. Now, if your poo is greasy, and this has happened to me multiple times before, usually after I eat Taco Bell, your poo probably has a lot of high oily fats in it. These will also generally tend to float. Like we said, fat floats. So if your poo is full of fat, it'll float. Well, if you have these oily poos, like they're very oily, they're very greasy, they come out pretty quick or pretty clean, probably, and they float, especially if they float, that probably means that you have a lot of oil in your diet. Whether it's healthy oil or not, there can be unhealthy oils like trans fats and deep fried, or it can be healthy oils like olive oil. Now, it's not usually a medical problem. If this continues and continues to happen and you don't eat a lot of oils, fatty foods like that, and it's not floating, you should probably see the doctor, because it could be that your body isn't digesting fat well enough. If your body doesn't digest the fat, the body's gonna just let it go. So yeah, that is kind of what the color and texture of your poos mean. I hope you guys found this normal. If you have a poo that I did not mention or touch on here, ew, touch on, that's gross. If you have a poo that I did not mention here, be sure to tell me about your poo in the comments, and we will either do another video. Actually, don't tell me in the comments, post a video response. Actually, don't, because that might be embarrassing. Post a video response talking about your poo if you can, or any other video response that you might have, or your reaction to this video, or your mom's reaction to this video. Or just tell me about your poos in the comments. Ask me any questions about your poos. Maybe I didn't talk about a certain poo here. And if you have any of the poos that we mentioned, go talk to your doctor right now and tell us all what your doctor says. So I love you guys so much. I hope you found this informative. Hope it wasn't too gross. And I hope that you all check your poos next time you go. Love you, and I will see you after I take a poo. Because technically I'll take a poo between now and tomorrow, so I'm telling the truth. I'm not a liar. So see you guys after I poo. Love you. Bye.